What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. We got a great episode of GoJo and Golic coming your way. The Har-Bowl brothers went at it last night, and you know what? The Ravens won again. Just can't seem to get that W against his brother. Anyway, we will talk coaches on the hot seat because in the NFL, the coaches carousel, it is ever going. So we'll talk about whose seat is getting very warm. Plus, college football rankings. We will talk about all of that. We have some great guests coming our way. It's going to be a fun 2 hours, okay? So stay where you are.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here. We're presented by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal, and we got a great show for you. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network and our YouTube channel. Justin Pugh, former NFL offensive lineman who is on the road trying to find the best fans in the NFL on Thursday Night Football. So was just at the snow game Dad was at with Jameis Winston and company doing snow angels all over the place. Going to talk to him also about the state of his New York Giants and the Saquon Barkley gift that keeps on giving as he walked out the door. Plus our buddy Jason Fitz, who normally joins us on Wednesday, going to join us on Tuesday. It's a different week right now. And if you're wondering at home why my father is eating cake right now, it is 6 o'clock local in Arizona. Jesse is very confused, but that is because today is one of the holiest holidays. We will get to the results of the Har-Bowl last night. We will tell you why there is something everyone's getting wrong about the running back conversation that's getting ready to happen. But first, we're going to wish my mom a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. That is why Dad is enjoying a robust breakfast of cake there, because for a man who now has to spend the rest of his day taking care of my mom, at the beginning of the day, she is the one walking out and delivering breakfast, or in this case, cake to him.
I was going to say, it's your mom's birthday, so your dad is eating cake that she gave him? It's not,
well,
math
exactly.
ain't mathin'.
As part of the gift I gave her, I leave her a card when I get up for her birthday, but I got a mini cake as well. So it was sitting on the counter when she got up with the dogs to watch the show. Kind of a nice surprise. Happy birthday, hon. 29, another year of 29. And I left her a cake, and of course she calls me from in the house to hear, and she says, "You want a piece of cake, don't you?" And I said, No, that's your cake. That is your cake. You do with it what you please. If you feel the need to bring me in a piece, I'm not going to turn it down. So listen, we all win. It's her birthday, it's her day, and I just had cake.
Nice. What kind of cake is it?
It's like a birthday cake. It's just like a vanilla with sprinkles on it. Nice whipped cream, creamy frosting. Very nice for the palate this early in the morning with a nice cup, a hot cup of coffee. It's of the birthday
cake varietal.
Wonderful.
That genus, phylum, class, order, species.
Right.
No, yeah. Every birthday in the Golic family, no matter how great or small, is really a means to an end for everyone to have birthday cake and get their fix. The problem is see, mine's in September, so we've got some time and distance. We go on a run here soon. Mom's birthday sort of kicks off Sagittarius season, where we go her birthday today, my dad's birthday's on December 12th, my sister's is on the 21st, and then my brother's a Christmas Day baby. He's born on the 25th. Yep. So we've got an unholy run here where between my mom's birthday, Thanksgiving, my dad, brother, and sister's birthday, and Christmas, that's a lot of sugar all at once. So you can see how we've ended up having to go and prick my dad's finger and take the little number that comes out of that.
Yeah, you can see why we're a diabetes family.
Yeah, I was going to say, if your doctor's watching, look away. Cake for breakfast.
Yeah. The math is definitely mathing there, Jesse.
I never do a blood test during the holidays.
Smart, Senior. That is
just
smart.
A waste of time and just makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
I did my blood panels once coming back from a bachelor party in New Orleans.
Oh.
And I had it scheduled and just forgot. I went to the doctor and he looked at the results. He's like, "Dude, are you okay?" And I explained. He's like, "Why the hell would you come back and do blood panels after that?" So don't do blood panels after New Orleans. Don't do your blood sugar test after the holidays. But wish my mom at ND Mom a happy birthday on Twitter or whatever platform that you follow my mom on today. The best in the business here. Mom, gift is on the way. Looking forward to that. Unfortunately, it is not edible. I figured Dad was going to take care of that today. So what other festivities do you have planned for my mom today, Dad? What are you doing?
She's going to work out with Sydney, and that's pretty much it. Whatever she wants. I think we're going to go to lunch because we're more lunch people than dinner people. We don't like really eating a big meal before bed. So we're kind of lunch people. So she'd like to go out to lunch. So I'm taking her to lunch wherever she'd like to go.
Oh, okay.
Hey, listen, when you've had as many birthdays as we had, you celebrate them, but you don't go crazy on them. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Just soft launching birthdays from here on out here. Fine. Totally respect that. So happy birthday, Mom.
Jesse's not getting involved in the age thing here at all.
No. What I'm saying is this is like such a man planned birthday celebration where it's like, oh, we're just going to do what she wants. I'll tell you what she wants. She wants you to plan lunch and be like, hey, babe, I'm taking you to lunch here. Not like wherever you want. What do you want to do?
Well, I mean, wouldn't it behoove me to let her go to lunch to a place she wants to eat?
Do you know where she might want to eat?
Yes, it's the same place that we're going to eat. It's the same place that she wants to eat. So
then it all works out.
We've been married going on 38 years, so we kind of figure out each other pretty easily.
You probably have
here.
this one down by now. Yeah.
The patterns are pretty well worn at this point here. They got a good rhythm, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Dad, because you need to make sure that Mom is happy, because if she were some reason not around, it would be all hands on deck to try and raise you like a toddler from here on out. So we need Mom to keep on being happy, feeling loved, and making sure she could take care of you. So that is a wonderful celebration for Mom's birthday there. Happy birthday to her. I'd imagine it's not nearly as happy. So Mom would actually appreciate this as much or more than anybody, because my mom has always been on record of saying you are only, as a parent, as happy as your most upset child. And so for the Har-Bowl family here, difficult one coming off of the Har-Bowl that we had on Monday Night Football, where brother Jim is now 0 for lifetime against his brother John, coaching against each other in the NFL. And that didn't change last night. John Har-Baugh continues his dominance over his brother Jim as they get the win. Dad, Lamar Jackson continues his dominance over Monday Night Football, tossing a couple of more touchdowns, running for one for a guy who now has a stellar record on Monday Night Football, 22 touchdowns and 0 interceptions at this point, and found a way to dig the Ravens out of a little hole at the beginning of this game to run, literally that being the word, directly over a Chargers defense that, Dad, we know was very good to start this season and is very good, but hasn't really been tested against a ton of upper-level competition. You saw him last week and called him against the Cincinnati Bengals here. Now seeing them go through two better opponents from the AFC North, what is your assessment of where this Chargers team is at right now?
Well, I mean, they're good, not great. They have a nice record, obviously. They're in the playoffs at this point, but the passing game, they're averaging just over 200 yards a game. It's kind of against the better competition. We're kind of seeing what we thought from this team. While they have Justin Herbert, who was a fantastic quarterback, threw for 218, no touchdowns, no interceptions last night, but they're averaging, I think, just over 200 yards passing a game. And we knew they lost all their weapons, so they would probably take a step back there, but they still surprised us with their offense, and especially that young defense. But to your point, against better competition, they're just not there yet. 37 runs for Baltimore for 212 yards, almost 6 yards a carry. You got controlled that way. The defense couldn't stop the run. The offense, again, they're the explosion and the explosion, and that's where you look where Baltimore was susceptible to the deep ball. And the Chargers couldn't hit many of those, couldn't take advantage of that. So they're ahead of schedule, I think, of certainly where I thought, and I can only speak for myself, of where I thought they were going to be. But against the top tier competition, they're still a tick below. And I think it's both sides of the ball. The defensive side has improved, but not enough. On the offensive side, definitely from the passing game power has taken a step back. Then you lose J.K. Dobbins in the second quarter with a knee injury. That certainly hurts your running game. So they're again better than I expected, but against upper echelon competition, still not quite there. Even though this was, listen, when I say not quite there, close. It was 17-16 going into the fourth quarter. And then it was Baltimore with 2 touchdowns, I think a 6-yarder to Andrews, then like a 50-yard run by Hill to kind of ice the game. That was like with 7 minutes to go and put them up a couple of scores. Chargers get a score with like 40-some seconds to go. So when I say just not there, I don't mean not close. I mean they're close, but they're just a tick below.
Yeah, the Chargers are a house where you can see a really strong foundation poured, but they're still putting up the framework right now. Like, we are not ready to pop this thing all the way open. You've seen them be able to help get the best out of certain guys, but you saw regression last night. You mentioned J.K. Dobbins going out hurts what's already dead. A run game that gets a lot of billing because it's Jim Har-Bowl and it's Greg Roman and is 20th in yards per play in terms of rushing the football. Like, they're not actually a great running team. They're just dedicated to it. In the passing game, Quentin Johnston had a resurgent year after a rookie season to forget, but last night a couple of big drops that looked like they got back in his head a little bit that had plagued him plenty his rookie year. And so you saw the talent gap show up against a team in the Baltimore Ravens that's expected to be a Super Bowl contender this year. The Chargers are absolutely still a playoff team, especially in the AFC playoff picture, where we just talked about the Dolphins the other day, who are sub 500 and still have a chance to push for a wild card spot. But you also see the difference of, all right, hey, there are areas we know they had to take a step back to go and take a step forward, so to speak, not to Matthew McConaughey this too much. And so I think that showed up for them last night as this game wore on. Even though, Dad, Baltimore, no Roquan Smith on defense, which obviously is huge for them going back to the injury last game against the Steelers. And so I think I was as impressed with Baltimore's ability to push through that and continue to go against what is, again, objectively a very good Chargers defense to go and move the ball the way that they did in the second half, to me was a good sign for this Baltimore Ravens team that it hit a little bit of a rough patch in the last few games.
Yeah. And Baltimore, their defense, they had, like I said, didn't give up that chunk play downfield. They had 4 sacks up front. Very tough against the run, and that showed, obviously, with J.K. going out, but only 20 carries just for the Rams or the Chargers. They ended up throwing it 36 times. But because it was a close game, I think they ditched the running game when J.K. Dobbins went out. And he only had 6 carries at that point. Because as I mentioned, it was a close game. You could have kept going with the running game. Even, 17-16, as I said, then 23-16, still basically within a score until 7 minutes to go in the game. Because the time of possession was basically the same. Both teams had 9 possessions. It's not like it was really one-sided in that stretch. It's just that the Chargers decided to go more with the passing game. And you mentioned it about Quentin Johnston. I mean, he's been having, it's been put on his shoulders, and he's been playing pretty well this year. 5 targets, no catches. That certainly hurt. Ladd McConkey is doing Ladd McConkey things that we thought he would do out of Georgia. That's not surprising. But yeah, Quentin Johnston, it was a little bit of a step back for him last night.
Yeah, it was, and I hope he can continue to take this step forward and this doesn't get in his head too much, because he had become a really productive player with some big touchdown catches for this Chargers team that still, again, this is also the Ravens. Like, we don't have to make this a ringing indictment of the Chargers. Yes, against upper-level competition, there were questions. They just beat the Bengals team that everybody likes, at least on offense, last week in Sunday Night Football after letting them back in the door and avoiding chargering, and now we know there's a bunch of ties that bind in here. So, Dan, I want to talk about one other element of this that was interesting to me, and we had so much conversation coming off this weekend about Saquon Barkley. Sunday Night Football, another monster performance, 255 rushing yards, about him now. And on the DraftKings Sportsbook, he's 3rd in the MVP odds at plus 475 here. Are you surprised that Derrick Henry does not get any semblance of that same buzz in Baltimore here? He's tied for he's at the 12th best odds at plus 7,000. Now, it's a little misleading volume stats-wise for the two of them. They're separated by about 57 yards, but Saquon Barkley has yet to have, or has already had a bye. The Baltimore Ravens have not had their bye yet, and so he's one game behind Derrick Henry in terms of total production here. But all of their deep statistics in terms of yards per carry, yards after contact, rush yards over expected are nearly identical on the season. Saquon Barkley has 151 more receiving yards. So I'd ask you, Dad, is that enough of a difference in your mind for the gap in the way that we talk about them to feel as wide as it is right now?
I think one of the big differences is the fact that Derrick Henry has Lamar Jackson. And I think voters will look at that as kind of an aid, where Saquon Barkley has Jalen Hurts. But Jalen Hurts, well, I guess he's not that far behind. Jalen Hurts has 456 yards rushing, and Lamar has right around 600. So it is closer than I thought. Certainly a difference in catching the ball out of the backfield. Saquon Barkley, the more versatile back. Justice Hill comes in to catch the ball more out of the backfield for Baltimore, but Saquon stays in and can catch the ball as well. And also, Baltimore was the leading rushing team last year. I know Philly was right up there, but so they're and right now, Saquon Barkley is leading the league in rushing. Philly's number 1 in rushing. Derrick Henry is number 2 in rushing. Baltimore's number 2 in rushing. And Josh Jacobs, by the way, is 3rd in rushing at just under 1,000 yards. And the Packers are the number 3 rushing team. So obviously that follows suit. And Derrick Henry has more touchdowns, has 13 rushing touchdowns to Saquon's 10. But I think the versatility of Saquon maybe gives him the edge. But I mean, this was the first game Derrick Henry didn't score a touchdown. I mean, the dude has been on a run. So I can see, but him being a game ahead certainly just kind of makes a little more distance in the rushing attack for Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I get all that, and this will be a season-long conversation. And I'm not saying Saquon doesn't deserve a lot of praise. He is ahead right now. He is the leading running back in the NFL. It's been great to see him go from New York to Philadelphia, and we haven't really seen this kind of season from Saquon before. We've seen Derrick Henry win the rushing title. We've seen him be great, and maybe that's part of it. But I really struggle as Derrick Henry, 24 for 140 last night, averaging 5.8 a carry, basically the way he's done all season. I struggle to see a world where we're making this robust MVP push for Saquon Barkley and not at least mentioning Derrick Henry in the picture when most of the same arguments apply to him. Like, yeah, Derrick Henry's got Lamar Jackson. Saquon Barkley has got the better offensive line objectively. Between the two, faces light boxes 44.8% of the time, as opposed to Derrick Henry, who gets them under 28% of the time, and has better wide receivers. Zay Flowers is probably on par with Devonta Smith, but A.J. Brown's a better receiving option than anything Baltimore has.
So where is Derrick Henry listed as far as odds? I know Saquon is 3rd behind the 2 quarterbacks, Lamar and Josh. Where is Derrick? I can't
Derrick
pull it
Henry
up
is
as quick as you
12th
guys.
at plus 7,000 in between Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow. That's crazy. I didn't realize he was that far back.
That gap is what blows my mind, because ostensibly they're in very similar situations, going from teams that were bad to teams that were good without them. I get that the Eagles bottomed down in the back half of last season. Saquon's not the only change they made. Like, there were wholesale coordinator changes. The defense has improved year over year in the way that Baltimore's has regressed. Like, there is so much more middle ground and similarity in this situation that, again, Saquon Barkley deserving of this conversation. So is Derrick Henry. And I get that, kind of like we talked about in Colorado with the Heisman, you might get cannibalization that happens because Lamar Jackson is also a leader in this category. But I want people to put some respect on Derrick Henry's name when we talk about the best backs in the league. We'll see if Justin Pugh, former NFL offensive lineman, agrees with us next on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. As we roll along here, breaking down not only saw last night, but across the NFL at large, excited to bring in former NFL offensive lineman, first-round pick by the New York Giants, Justin Pugh, kind enough to join us here now. Justin's also traveling his way around on Thursday Night Football this year, trying to find the best fan bases. You can check out his YouTube channel, all his socials, find out where your fan base ranks among the best that he's seen right now. And Justin, I know you and my dad, albeit very different experiences, were both at the Cleveland Browns win over the Steelers this last week in the snow globe. Dad was all in his cush little box calling the game, and you were actually out here with the dog pound and the snow, man. How was that?
I was in the Muni lot. I was in the dog pound. I was 30 rows up. My producer, when it came to getting tickets, put us a little further up than maybe we wanted to be. I was in the midst of it. They were barking at Steelers fans, saying things that I cannot say on air. It is the most rabid 2-8 fan base I have ever experienced. The snow comes down. Cleveland really stole my heart.
Well, that was, I even said it was amazing with 4 minutes to go. Pittsburgh scored and took the lead, and I expected an exodus by the fans. And they all stayed. They all knew because of the weather that game could change, and it certainly did. 2-8 beating 8-2 was a pretty impressive night.
Yeah, when you look at that game, you thought there's just the Cleveland Browns dominated the first 2.5 quarters. Then all of a sudden the Steelers scored twice. The fans in the stands were like, oh, no, we expected this. We're the Cleveland Browns. Like, we knew we were going to lose this game. There was zero hope that the Cleveland Browns were going to score. Like, they don't let you know. It's buried so deep down in their souls that, like, they expect to lose every game. Like, I had fans that they call Ken Dorsey during the game and say, run the ball with Nick Chubb. It's all they scream, run the ball and bark. But, yeah, to come out with the victory, they were the happiest people in the world that night.
It has been a fan base that's been dealing with a lot as of late. And I don't know if, being around their boots on the ground, if you heard any musings about what Cleveland fans want to see going forward. Deshaun Watson done for the season, we know, but that contract hanging like an albatross around their necks going into the next couple of seasons here. What do you think ultimately happens with that team at the quarterback position next year?
Yeah, that's going to go down as one of the worst contracts of all time. Not even football. Like, I don't know what other contracts we can throw in there throughout history. The Cleveland Browns actually, the way they spend money, Andrew Berry, their GM, is a good GM. He just swung and missed on Deshaun Watson terribly. How they can claw out, I'm not sure. Deshaun Watson has to be on the team. Like, the fans were talking about it. His dead cap hit is almost 3/4 of the salary cap next year. He's going to be on the team. I see him being cut after that. Try to keep a guy like Jameis Winston. Try to go and draft maybe a young quarterback and have to hit on that. I don't know what Jameis's price tag will be, but you're trying to couple, a veteran that's going to take less. Maybe there's another guy out there, a former teammate of mine, maybe a guy like Daniel Jones. You put a supremely talented team around a quarterback, and hopefully he can have a resurrection similar to a Baker Mayfield or a Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Daniel Jones certainly going to get his chance somewhere. And let's talk about his old team, a team you spent your first 5 years of your career with, the Giants. They let go of Daniel Jones. We all know it was for the money reason, the injury guarantee contract. They said it was football decision. The team looked horrible in their last game. How do you think they handled the Daniel Jones situation?
As best as they could. I mean, Joe Shane, the only issue is the hard knocks. When you come out with the Hard Knocks episode and you say, we don't want to have a $40 million a year quarterback handing off to a $12 million a year running back, and then the quarterback tears his ACL in the next season, which Daniel can't avoid that injury, you have to play him in the following season. They had the cap hit. Trying to cut him or trying to move on didn't make sense. He's a phenomenal leader. He gives everything on the field, but he didn't play well enough to win games. And in the NFL, if you're not winning games, they are going to move on. So it was the right decision this year to move on. I haven't seen a quarterback go up and say, hey, can I have my release? And they did it midseason. I thought they might designate him for a post-June cut, which would spread his cap hit out and kind of help the team that wise. So John Mara and the Giants had a classy move there, letting Daniel Jones walk into free agency right now. And he's mentioned some teams like Baltimore, maybe the Vikings. Sam Darnold went down with an injury in this last game. He came back in, but I immediately thought maybe Daniel Jones. The Raiders had a quarterback injury. So I think it's a bigger issue, but specifically when it comes to Daniel Jones, I think they did everything they could, and I think Daniel gave everything he could. It just wasn't enough.
Certainly, like you said, he's going to be incredibly valuable to some of these contenders down the stretch to have a guy with his physical tools, his experience starting in this league. For the team that he left behind now, though, in the Giants, who has gone through the release of Daniel Jones and that loss, has watched Saquon Barkley do what he did on Sunday Night Football this week and really the entire season with Philadelphia here, do you anticipate more changes being made with this coaching staff, with this front office before it's all said and done this season?
If you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said no. Since then, Saquon Barkley has gone on an Eric Dickerson type pace of just he's going to go over 2,000 total yards, rushing yards on the season, and that looks bad for management there. It looks bad for Joe Shane. Not only with Saquon Barkley, you have Xavier McKinney, who he also left in free agency and went to Green Bay, and he right now leads the league in interception. Looks like a defensive player of the year candidate. I get why Joe Shane let Saquon walk in terms of if you take Saquon's name out of it. A running back in this market, teams have shown Joe Mixon when they let him walk. Derrick Henry, they let him walk. They are not valuing that position. So I understand that side of the business. Saquon Barkley's not just a running back. You look at the Eagles. I mean, I would hold out right now this week if I was Saquon Barkley. I'm kidding. But you look at A.J. Brown and some of the receivers and what they're making. Saquon Barkley has to be worth more than $12 million a year if some of these receivers are making $35 million. Because Saquon Barkley is the MVP maybe of the league, but 100% for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's why it looks bad for the general manager there in New York. But I understand his philosophy. I understand why he didn't want to pay a safety and didn't want to pay a running back. He was trying to invest in the offensive line. They took a shot on Daniel Jones. He did well in this last draft class. The one guy that I know that I was with that team last year is Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll, it's I don't know if the locker room's been lost, but I know he's a good coach and he will be an offensive coordinator bare minimum next year because he has that pedigree. I hope they keep him around, they keep some consistency. Consistency is such a massive piece of the NFL, in my opinion. So I would like those guys to get one more chance with the quarterback of their choosing.
So, not the only team, the Giants struggling in the NFC East. The Cowboys, who many thought would take a step back, have taken more than a few step backs, and they have their quarterback, albeit he's injured. What do you think has gone wrong with the Cowboys?
The way they spend. I always go back to the money. Look at the Eagles. The Eagles, everyone's like, well, Saquon Barkley's running behind that great offensive line. The Giants couldn't do that. Well, if the Giants spent like the Philadelphia Eagles did, they could have that offensive line. And Jerry Jones spends the worst of any owner in the NFL. So you let your two backup defensive ends, and I put them in quotes backup because they're now starting for the Washington Commanders. You let your starting center leave. You let your starting left tackle leave. You didn't replace them with anybody. You don't draft a running back. You try to patch that with Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle. You think that the team can just survive on bubblegum and Band-Aids over certain positions, and they're finding out you can't do that. You lose Micah Parsons to an injury. You lose DeMarcus Lawrence to an injury. The defensive backs have been beat up, and you just can't throw Dak to CD. Teams are going to scheme you up. They're going to shut that down, and the Cowboys found out. They thought that they had it all squared away. I think it's time for Jerry Jones to potentially step down as maybe the GM, let a guy like Will McCauley, who's made some great draft picks, step in, bring someone who understands the current cap and how that works. I'm not saying Jerry doesn't, but he tries to play poker and he overpays every single player every single time. So I just think there's some philosophy issues there in Dallas that are coming back to bite them because they have talent.
There's no doubt. But like you said, for all the talk he gets about a businessman, we watched Jerry stare down each player until the end where he ultimately pays them exactly what they wanted the entire time. So the negotiation tactics not necessarily netting him a ton of positive results. Speaking of positive results, we've talked a lot about one team in New York. Let's talk about the New York Jets, as there's been a lot of conversation, as there always is, about Aaron Rodgers and his future with this team. Woody Johnson, the owner, making sweeping changes, first firing the head coach, then Joe Douglas shown the door as the GM there. Do you think Aaron Rodgers is playing football next year? Like, forget for this Jets team where it seems like the writing is clearly on the wall. Do you think Aaron Rodgers is a starting quarterback in the NFL in 2025?
I do not. I think this year has been tough. It's been a tough pill to swallow because I'm an Aaron Rodgers believer. He's the MVP. He puts that cape on. I feel like he's Superman out there. He can make every throw. And then I'm like, all right, maybe it is Robert Saleh. By the way, I completely disagree with that firing. I think Robert Saleh should still be the head coach of the New York Jets, but you see it and you're like, all right, maybe Robert Saleh was the issue. Okay, I'm not in the building. I don't know. Then they trade for Devontae. Then they get Hassan Reddick. It's like, all right, they have the team. And now we're hearing Woody Johnson and the ownership group have made a lot of decisions without the GM's consent. And anytime there's fraction amongst an organization, it shows on the field. And Aaron Rodgers hasn't played well at times. You know, you turn on the film. I don't have to explain any more than that. You turn the film on, and I think back to the Arizona Cardinals game when they had a chance to turn their season around and just couldn't connect. No one was on the same page. Aaron Rodgers, who has been the master of picking up blitzes, is like letting free safeties hit him unblocked off his blind side. So it just seems to me like it's time to move on. You know, I know he had aspirations of running for vice president. There's a lot of other things that Aaron Rodgers will do great in his lifetime. I've only heard about how good of a teammate he is from guys that play with him in Green Bay. I think for his legacy, he'll probably fight for one more, but are there many teams out there that are going to give him the reign that he has in New York with the Jets? So unless it is the Jets, I don't think we see him playing football next year.
Yeah, that is the interesting part of this is even if Aaron Rodgers had a chance to play next year, if he goes to a place that's not going to give him a level of control that he's used to, is that something he even wants, given, like you said, what he's been used to in his career? Speaking of what you've been used to, so I'm curious, you've been going around, it's a great series, checking out Thursday Night Football here. Thanksgiving is sort of the Valhalla of Thursday Night Football. As my dad always points out, when players today bring up Thursday Night Football as the conundrum, he points out we've been doing this for years, albeit on the holiday. Are you taking the holiday off? Are you getting out to any of these Thanksgiving games? How do you approach one of football's high holidays?
I know. I am not traveling this Thursday. Look, I'm 3 years into my marriage, my daughter's first Thanksgiving. If I wanted to stay married, I'm home for Thanksgiving this year. The games, I'm a little nervous about the games as well. Miami winning really helps that late game. The Cowboys-Giants isn't going to be must-see TV. But, you know, it's going to be a good day. I will not be traveling, unfortunately, but we're picking it back up next week. I think we're in San Francisco or Detroit next week. We do it all. Like, I didn't even have tickets to the Cleveland game. Like, that's how last minute we do this thing. We fly in, we're there, but sometimes we make some last minute adjustments.
That's hilarious. So let me tell you, you're doing absolutely the right thing, staying home with your wife and your child. That is the smart long play there.
Hey, sometimes you got to play chess, not checkers, right?
Absolutely. Well, check him out on YouTube. Justin Pugh 67 is where you can check out all this great content around Thursday Night Football. But this week, let the man rest, enjoy some time with his family, a little football, a little turkey, all the good stuff. Justin, we appreciate you giving us some time today, man. Thanks so much. Hopefully we'll do it again soon, all right?
Fun as always, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man. But that's something. I mean, being a pro ball player, going around in charters, traveling great and everything, and then deciding to just fly into a city, get tickets to a Thursday night game, and sit up with the crowd. That's impressive.
It's a test of mental willpower as much as anything because, you know, the things that you used to hear people in the stands shout at you guys on the field to now have to just sit around and hear all of those takes, to hear Vince Lombardi sitting next to you in the upper deck with every answer to what's going on and probably hold your tongue has got to be pretty damn impressive. But, Dad, it is fun to see the other vantage point. I will never forget the first time I went back to tailgate a Notre Dame football game after I was done trying to play. And I'm sitting there in the tailgate lot. It's a night game, and I'm looking at all my friends who I used to give grief all the time for leaving at halftime of our games to go back home and take a nap. And I looked at them halfway through the day as I am drunk, starving, exhausted, and go, I get it now. Tailgating is a sport unto itself, and if you don't have the reps, it can hurt pretty badly.
Yeah, that's just a game I've never jumped into. I knew I couldn't hang. I don't even try to hang, or I'll completely miss the game.
There we go. Well, coming up next, we talked to Justin about a few coaches on the hot seat. We'll take some temperatures around the league next on GoJo and Golic for some other seats.
GoJo and Golic, Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you on a Tuesday. Guys, we are past the halfway point of the NFL season, which means we pretty much know which teams are good, which teams are middling, which teams are bad, and which teams are in a world of trouble, okay? And for the bad teams, the teams in a world of trouble, that means the coaches are probably on the hot seat. And on this show, while we never want anybody to lose their job, we do also know that the coaching carousel never stops moving, okay? So let's talk about some coaches and their seats. Are they cool, lukewarm, warm, hot, or scalding? Okay, we're gonna go through and talk about this. And we're gonna—
The hell of a scale.
Yeah, I know. I had to, because lukewarm is like we're getting there, and then you're warm, you're like, oh, that's nice. So warm's kind of nice, and then it gets bad from there. Scalding obviously means things are bad, and I hope you guys know that. So let's start with Kevin Stefanski, the Browns. A lot of stuff going on here. What's the temperature of this man's seat?
Yeah, Dad, so this is a fascinating one. We just talked to Justin about this, about what you do with the quarterback situation. He even said Andrew Berry, who, by the way, along with Kevin Stefanski, got extensions in June with the Cleveland Browns. So they were rewarded for last year what was a Coach of the Year performance, and certainly a roster that once it got a quarterback in there and Joe Flacco that could actually do something and move things forward and throw for over 300 yards, looked like the Super Bowl roster that Andrew Berry had built. They just swung and missed on the most important position in football. You usually don't survive that. And while you're going to have Deshaun Watson on that roster, it does certainly seem like they're going to be allowed to pick who the next guy is based on the success that they had last year. Right now, Kevin Stefanski's 37-30 in 4 seasons. They've got the one playoff win under their belt. They made that great run last year. I think it's enough for Kevin Stefanski and them to survive. What about you?
Oh, I think it's cool to use Jesse's scale. I think it's cool, even though they did swing and miss at the quarterback position, and that was an all-encompassing move, right? The team had to, management coaches had to want him. The owner had to want to pay that amount. However, it was decided. It was a definite swing and miss. But Stefanski has a good bones of a team. Now they're going to need a quarterback, whether that's Jameis bridging the next guy or not. If Jameis is even back, he's going to be a free agent. But I think they've done enough good in that organization, has Stefanski, to not make a wholesale. I guess that's the difference. Do you keep what you're doing another year or so, or do you make a wholesale change? And I just don't think that a wholesale change is the way to go.
I would say for my temperature, I would say lukewarm, just because you're 2-8 and you were party to that quarterback decision. That is one of the worst, if not the worst, in pro sports history in terms of the evaluation and execution of that deal. And by the way, the core of your roster a little cracked. Like, the offensive line was the strength under Kevin Stefanski for the entire time of his career. And now that group, by injury and by just the sands of time, has been compromised some. Nick Chubb's in the final year of his contract with them, who's been a guy who's been an identity of your team. On defense, you've been a little bit beat up this year. So I do have questions about how they're going to transition this roster into the next phase around the quarterback, but I do think they're going to be the ones to do it. So that one, you and I both ultimately agree. While it's uncomfortable this season, and I think conversation about this is justified, probably going to be around here. Dad, not nearly as complicated, I think, though, as what's going on in Chicago with Matt Eberflus and company here. The Bears are 4-7 now, and in the last couple of games since the firing of Shane Waldron at offensive coordinator, we've seen a better version of the quarterback Caleb Williams come out. A quarterback who's really was going to be the pass-fail grade for Matt Eberflus and this staff in terms of how they were evaluated going forward. Usually firing a coordinator, and this was one where there were players in the locker room that basically staged a mini revolt to try and push towards this point. Usually that's a precursor to the coach getting fired. I would say the seat is pretty damn hot here. I would say maybe not scalding, but it's pretty hot in Chicago for a team that's got to decide now, hey, we like our rookie quarterback. We spent the number 1 pick on him. Do we now want you to be the one molding him based on what we've seen the last few years? I would lean no so far, barring something unforeseen down the rest of the season of Caleb Williams maybe continuing to take big steps forward in the last few games.
And while I always want to qualify that we never, ever wish for anybody to be fired, we'd love everybody to keep their job at all times, but we know it's just not going to happen.
Jesse did that already. We're good. We're covered. We have washed this segment in the waters of people that love and respect everyone's jobs, that truly do want to see the best for everybody, but have to talk about this.
This is scalding. I think it's scalding. And really, the Bears have three choices here. Keep everything the same, change everything, or if Thomas Brown is having a positive effect, fire the head coach, bring in a new coach with the caveat he has to keep Thomas Brown as a coordinator, and no new head coach likes to do that. Every new head, especially if it's an offensive-minded head coach who may end up calling plays. Maybe that would be the way if an offensive head coach came in and said, I'm going to take over the play calling duties and just keep Thomas Brown. But that's usually a formula that doesn't work. The problem is you see the positives of Caleb Williams. Now, again, he hasn't thrown an interception in 5 games. That predated Thomas Brown as well. So even though it was a little more hectic under Shane Waldron, Caleb hasn't been throwing interceptions. And now with Thomas Brown, he's got him getting rid of the ball a little quicker and such. So if Caleb continues to make strides under Thomas Brown, makes the decision a little more difficult, because if you do change everything, that will be the third offensive coordinator Caleb Williams has seen in basically going into his second year, which is really, really tough on a quarterback. But I think with Eberflus, it is scalding.
I would agree. Half measures are what got you to this point to begin with. Not making the decision to do this prior to Caleb Williams' rookie year, when you were thinking about it at the end of last season with Matt Eberflus, now landed you in this limbo. And to your point, the last thing you want to do, especially with the coordinator voice, is create that sort of limbo or overlap by trying to keep on a coordinator because they gel for a little bit over the back half of the season. I think if you're going to do this, it's got to be all the way. It's got to be a new staff. I know we've talked about it before on the show, and I agree with Dominique Foxworth to a point. You find the best head coach, even if he is not an offensive mind, but call it what it is. You've got to nail whoever is the play-calling voice in Caleb Williams' ear. The head coach is an important hire. That voice is the most important voice you will hire in this next cycle because of your investment in Caleb in this franchise.
And you're right. It doesn't have to be an offensive-minded coach, but normally – when one coach is fired, the next coach is the opposite. Like Eberflus is a defensive guy, the next coach is normally an offensive guy. But you're right, it doesn't matter. It only matters who is running Caleb Williams.
And certainly we'll see a number of quality defensive coordinators that probably make their way in this hiring cycle. I mean, look at Mike McDonald. You look only for that recent example of great teacher, program builder on the defensive side of the ball that's now translated to that, albeit it's the chaotic NFC West, but still first place in the NFC West. I digress. Dad, let's go out to the AFC West here. Antonio Pierce, 2-9 coach of the Raiders right now, 7-13 record overall going back to when he took over last year. And man, it seems like a far cry from when we were smoking those cigars in the locker room last year after the coaching change from Josh McDaniels got made there. We've seen over the last few years in the NFL, the last 3 years, one first-year head coach has been let go in season each of the past 3 seasons. Urban Meyer in 2021, Nathaniel Hackett in 2022, and Frank Reich with the Carolina Panthers last year in 2023. Do you think Antonio Pierce makes it 4 for 4, Dad?
I also don't think he's a first-year head coach. He was the interim head coach last year, so I kind of don't put him in that stat. I get technically he's a first-year head coach because he was an interim last year, but he was an interim, and he had him smoking cigars in the locker room, and he had the players all backing him. I think this is scalding as well. I think they need a new quarterback. I think they need an overhaul on offense. You're going to basically build around Brock Bowers on the offensive side of the ball, and Max Crosby, if you hang on to him on the defensive side of the ball, Christian Wilkins, who they picked up in the offseason. I just think this is going to be a whole new crew bringing in whether it's a young quarterback or whether it's Daniel Jones or whatever. I just think it's going to be a whole new crew.
Yeah, I would tend to agree here too. And this is, no matter what level of football, the higher the interim coach that the locker room rallied around is always a real double-edged sword of riding an emotive wave to make that decision that ultimately doesn't bear out. And we've seen some of the consternation that's come from this season, managing the personality types on that team, led to the Devontae Adams trade going to the New York Jets, all those things that I agree probably going to lead to a regime change in Las Vegas at a critical juncture, because to the point we talked about with Chicago, you're getting ready to go and introduce a new quarterback into this team, and so you want to make sure you've got the right guy doing this. Dad, let's go to the NFC East and just do this in bundle. It's amazing to think there was a time in the season where some people might have thought we'd be doing 3 NFC East coaches with the way that things were looking for Nick Sirianni early in the season, the way a lot of people were talking about him, and now they look like the second best team in the NFC and one of the best teams in football. But for Mike McCarthy, who came into this season as a lame duck head coach, playing out the last year of his contract, and Brian Daboll, who's 2-9, just released their quarterback and has the Saquon Barkley specter hanging over it, it certainly seems like these are 2 scalding hot seats as well.
I think Daboll is scalding for sure, and as Justin Pugh said, he'll end up at the very least a coordinator after this. But I like Daboll; he's a good dude. But it's about wins and losses, and the situation going on. The McCarthy thing, Mike, I can't figure out. Remember, going into the playoffs last year, Jerry Jones was asked about Mike McCarthy's future, and he said, let's wait and see what goes on in the playoffs. And they got I called the game. They got smoked at home by the Packers. Everybody thought McCarthy was going to be gone, and he wasn't. And now, in the offseason, it was Jerry Jones that did absolutely nothing to help this team. And then you lose your quarterback to injury for the year. So I don't know if I could put scalding on Mike McCarthy. I think I can put hot on him, but because of last year, and I thought for sure, everybody thought for sure he was going to be gone after the egg that they laid in the playoffs, and he wasn't. And if Jerry Jones can't look in the mirror about this past offseason and say this was on him, and I have no idea if he can or not, that Mike McCarthy could actually survive. Now, I don't think he will, but boy, I'd throw my hands in the air after the end of last year.
You know what? Mike McCarthy and this locker room deserve a ton of credit for how they've responded the last couple of games. Took Houston down to the wire in a game a couple of weeks ago, and then followed it up this weekend, getting a win in a circumstance that no one thought they'd be able to pull it off there with the Washington Commanders as 10.5-point favorites. And so I do think, Dad, Mike McCarthy has shown a lot that the players in this locker room, we always talk about that lose the locker room factor, as Brian Daboll has to put out these fires after Malik Neighbors is talking in the media about why he didn't get any targets in the first half. And Dexter Lawrence is calling that team soft, and those things leaking out, usually not a good situation. Mike McCarthy's got Cooper Rush at quarterback again, a bunch of backup guards in the game, and these guys are going out and fighting tooth and nail, scoring in all phases of the game. So it is a ringing endorsement of Mike McCarthy and the effect that he's got and the way guys feel about him in that locker room. I just think, to your point, self-awareness of the man in charge there is not the specialty, and so I don't think him putting his problems on somebody else is something I'm taking off the table.
And then you have 2 interim coaches, and because we saw an interim coach last year in Antonio Pierce get the job, do we think Jeff Ulbrich or Darren Rizzi from the Jets and the Saints, respectively, are going to keep their jobs? I don't think they will. I think they'll go back to being coordinators and assistants. But there are 2 out there. Do you think either one has a chance for the job in their respective teams?
No, I don't. I think Woody Johnson's in burn it down mode right now in New York. I think he's going to try and get all this set up before he goes and becomes an ambassador again, which seems like a likely appointment since he was the last time under the Trump administration. And no, I think as much as Rizzi has been a very popular figure, he's one that does seem to have more of that groundswell support. And it's not surprising. You know this like I do. Special teams coaches generally tend to be these guys because they get to work with everybody. They prioritize the whole depth of the roster because they're usually working with guys that aren't the starters that are trying to make their way on. You got to be kind of quirky because you don't get as much meeting time as everybody else. He's got a name that has Riz in it, which in 2024 is invaluable, but I don't think those things are going to be enough to ultimately keep the job for him in New Orleans. So, which is a shame, but I don't think ultimately surprising. I think New Orleans, I mean, we talked about the cap situation is hell there. Derek Carr is kind of quarterback limbo personified, and now they're going to have to go and maybe branch outside of the family and the coaching tree for the first time. So lots to consider. We didn't even get to Doug Peterson in Jacksonville in all this, which I think he might even be surprised he's still coaching in Jacksonville coming up right now. But coming up next, we'll get to some college ball with Jason Fitz in hour number 2 here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We had some returns in the NBA that you might have missed. Ja Morant back in action after a hip injury, scoring 22 points in the Grizzlies' win against Portland. Kristaps Porzingis returned to action for the Celtics as they cruised to a 126-94 win over the Clippers, scoring 51 points the second quarter. Elsewhere, the Denver Nuggets got waxed by the Knicks to the tune of 145-118, and Michael Malone was not happy. Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal are eyeing a return against the Lakers, both nursing calf injuries. And in a stunning return, Elfrid Payton scored a career-high 21 assists for the Pelicans in his first game back from action since April 2022. Back in action next, Jason Fitz.
Hour number 2 here on GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield, Jason Fitz, who usually joins us on Wednesday. Charlotte Wilder usually joins us on Tuesday. We have used their swap token this one time in the lead up to the holiday. And so Jason Fitz, you guys can catch hosting plenty of great shows over at Yahoo Sports. But for today, we'll go College Football Power Hour, which is a great one you should check out because, Jason, we got the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings coming up tonight. And this might be one of the more interesting rounds here, as we knew this last weekend was going to be one that took care of a lot. But before we get to all of that, you're a guy that authors some Orlovsky-esque food takes at times. Where are you at? Like, what are your Thanksgiving plans? How do you usually approach this holiday?
Okay, so I'll start by reminding you that I'm just better than everybody. No, so I start my day usually by going to a shelter of some sort and feeding people. So like that's my give back. I always on Thanksgiving and Christmas, I try to always give back to people. So that's really my main focus. And then from there, I don't know, last year, man, you guys can appreciate this. Last year I went to Foxwoods. I didn't really I don't have a big family. I don't have like any relationship with my parents or anything. So I went to Foxwoods and I sat at the sports book and I got hammered. And then I took myself to a nice dinner. I feel like this year, like I'm not drinking. So I don't know. But I will say this. I had, because I live in a state where it's legal, I had a liquid, I had a CBD drink with me, right? And I may have put a lot of CBD in that said drink. And so I was walking into the first place with my water bottle, and I was like, this is fine. I'm going to sip on this all day while I play at the roulette table was my goal. And then I saw, they had a sugar factory, and I was like, oh, I'm going to sit at a sugar factory and get a snack. And they were like, well, you can't come in if you have the water bottle. So like an idiot, I was like, all right, I'll just chug the water. I chugged the water and I sat down and I was like, wait, that was a lot in very little. So I walked into the sports book just already on one. It was a good day. So I think this year it's going to be back to Foxwoods is my new Thanksgiving tradition. Let's go.
I mean, I was expecting a turkey, food take. What the hell was that? Oh my! Now saying it, Foxwoods, pretty nice. The gambling, I'm with you on that.
Take
but
a chance,
holy smokes!
happen,
I mean, do you eat any kind of Thanksgiving food?
Okay, Thanksgiving food for the most part is just wildly overrated. Like it's just, look, you can eat mashed potatoes all year long. So like, I'm not going to crave mashed potatoes on that day. Plus mashed potatoes in general is just okay. And then from everything, like if you're giving me a casserole, what you're basically doing is dumping a bunch of canned stuff in a pan and baking it. I'm out. Turkey itself is just anything turkey can do, cake can do better. Anything chicken can do better. And you guys know that I hate pie. Like I prefer cake. So, I don't know. I might do I have a recipe this year for a graham cracker crust because pie crust is really the trash, but it's a graham cracker crust, dulce de leche pumpkin dessert. I might make that. I might go a little Betty Crocker with that.
I love that Jason got his pie and his turkey takes crossed up as he goes and slanders Thanksgiving food for everyone, which, listen, he's got a point. Most Thanksgiving food, especially the turkey, probably a little bit overrated here. If you throw a ham in the mix, like a honey-baked ham with that little bit of glaze on the outside, now you're cooking with some gas. But at GoJo and Golic, what are your best alternative holiday plans? Obviously, like, you get the Christmas Story movie where they go out for Chinese food on Christmas. Plenty of people have done that in the past, to the point of Jason Fitz going to Foxwoods, getting a little bit inebriated, and hanging out at the sports book all day here at GoJo and Golic for that. Because,
I wasn't a little bit inebriated. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Getting full-blown smacked, having a day at the casino by yourself, which sounds like a lovely form of self-care in its own. So, all right, beautiful. It did not disappoint in any way, shape, or form, did Jason. Fitz, biggest surprise you think we'll be talking about come tomorrow when we're assessing the damage from the College Football Playoff Committee's next ranking?
Well, look, I mean, the most important part of it is where does Indiana go? So I think the biggest surprise for people is that for everyone that sits here and says Alabama is done with 3 losses, I would love to join you in that parade. I think it's fun to see total chaos. You know that. I just don't think Alabama is going to be far enough down for most people's liking. So Alabama is still going to be right on the edge of this thing. I don't think they're in, but they're going to be right on the edge of this thing. And then, frankly, I do genuinely believe, not just hot take speak here, this is going to be the most interesting day in college football playoff committee history, because what they do with the 1-loss Indiana team that is a really jarring loss for a team that coming into that game had the 106th ranked strength of schedule. I don't know what the committee's going to do. I don't know how far they're going to throw Indiana down. I said at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on Saturday that Indiana was out of it. And then there was total chaos the rest of the day. So now I have no idea.
Yeah, that's obviously going to be the biggest question, is how far does Indiana fall? And is 12 going to be really out? Right? Because will the Big 12 get anybody in the top 12 to not knock out the top 12? So right now, basically, it'll probably be ASU as maybe the highest ranked Big 12 team. So is that 12th slot in your mind, Jason, up for grabs?
Yeah, 100%. Because when I did sort of my mock where I think we'll land, I had Arizona State coming in like between 16 and 17, somewhere around there. Right. So that absolutely Arizona State's a bit deep. And y'all, like I've said this to Mike, I just want to remind everybody right now, if UNLV wins this weekend, they will play Boise State for the Mountain West Championship. They are currently ranked around 22nd, 23rd. There is a real chance that Tulane and if UNLV upsets Boise State, we could have 2 bid thieves out of this. Like the winner of the Big 12 and the highest ranked group of 5 team could both not be top 12 teams. So I don't even know that I really feel confident saying going with 1 week left, I think you got to be in the top 10 of the committee's rankings to really feel secure, because 11 and 12 could both get bumped out of this thing.
That is an amazing thing to think about.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, we just watched Boise State almost lose on the road in Laramie to Wyoming. That if that team does get knocked out, one of those teams that you mentioned coming from outside the top 12 would be a top 4 seed, would get a first-round bye. Again, the 4 highest-ranked conference champions get a bye. So we would be talking about the apocalypse in year 1 for so many people's estimation
The
of this.
irony of
that
Mike,
actually, yeah.
The irony of the fact that UNLV could have a playoff game at Allegiant long before the Raiders ever do is not lost on me. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
No doubt about that. Barry Odom has been doing some great things out there, but that would be pretty tragic even by Raiders standards. I want to talk about something that happened last week, though, Fitz, that conversation where Indiana was sort of this totem for Lane Kiffin and a lot of the SEC crowd. Well, really, Lane Kiffin's was about conference championships, but a lot of the SEC crowd talking about Indiana's strength of schedule, and they got sort of brought up in a lot of those same ways as we talked about what teams would be rewarded or not for making conference championships. I guess I say all this to say Indiana's place in the rankings to me is important because while we're spending a lot of time talking about 3-loss SEC teams, Alabama in that mix, Ole Miss in that mix, who might be on the bubble of getting in or not, should it be the ACC that's quietly a little more concerned about this conference championship picture as it stacks up right now? Because in the rankings, you've got SMU, who will probably be inside the top 12 and the top 10. You've got Miami, who we know is up near number 6, will probably be right behind Notre Dame this week in the rankings now. And if those two teams get to conference championship weekend as we expect and play, and one of those teams loses and now is technically a 2-loss team but made their conference championship, are you really keeping Indiana in over them, knowing what the resumes look like, knowing the complications there? I think the ACC is actually the conference that should be banging the drum a lot harder for, hey, making it to the conference championship in this 12-team model of the playoff should actually count as an accomplishment. What do you say about that, Fitz?
Yeah, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. And look, I think SMU is much better positioned to lose the ACC championship game and still get benefit of the doubt from the committee than Miami is, because Miami has a fatal flaw. Miami's defense is tragic. Like, it is terrible. And I don't know that the committee will forgive what Georgia Tech did, which was essentially say, I'm going to run the football on you until you can stop it. At one point in that game, when I was rewatching it, there was a period where Georgia Tech ran the same play successfully 6 times in a row. If you can run the same run transparently, successfully 6 times in a row, and you're Georgia Tech against Miami, man, the committee, you know how much they value the line of scrimmage. The committee's going to sit there and say, man, I do not trust that defense. So if SMU goes in and thumps Miami the same way, just out physicals, which I think they're capable of doing, now you've planted a seed of, yeah, but the defense just isn't competitive no matter how good Cam Ward is. The opposite happens. SMU is a much more complete football team. I think SMU is going to win the ACC. Question is, what's it look like for Miami when that happens?
Should either of those teams with a loss, though, be ranked behind an Indiana team who we talked about? Now, the strength of schedule bumps up because they played Ohio State. They're 51st right now in that, but their only big game of the year was one where they went out and it was not competitive. I love Indiana. I've been a huge supporter of them, but those were not two teams playing the same game this last Saturday in Columbus. So do you think that we've talked about Tennessee could probably sit idly by and be fine in the college football playoff without making it to the conference championship in the SEC? Should Indiana be afforded that same privilege by way of playing in the Big Ten and having the season they've had up until Ohio State?
No. And the fact is, like, nobody wants to hear this, but there's a lot of similarity. If you take the Ohio State game out, which now I'm doing as a benefit to Indiana, I'm taking the Ohio State game out in forgiveness of the Ohio State game. There is not a huge difference between what we've seen outside of Ohio State this year for Indiana and what we saw last year from Liberty. And not Florida State, Liberty. Liberty went undefeated last year, playing absolutely nobody, and they weren't even part of the conversation because the committee said we are not going to reward that. If we are asked to take the Ohio State game out completely, Indiana is basically glorified Liberty, and we've already seen the committee say no to that.
All right, Jason, I have a prediction. You tell me if you think it's correct or not. I think there will be only the possibility of only one 3-loss team, and that would be if Georgia takes care of Georgia Tech. They're in the SEC. They're already in the SEC championship game, but if they beat Georgia Tech, have 2 losses, and then lose in the SEC championship game to probably Texas, who they've beaten already, I think they're in. I think other than that, if Georgia wins the SEC and only has 2 losses, there will be no 3-loss teams in the top 12.
I'm buying that. And I think that Georgia becomes the most chaotic example that we could possibly have. Because we sit here and say, well, what happens if you lose a conference championship game? We don't know. But the committee would be sending a very clear message. If Georgia goes to the SEC championship game and loses, picking up their third loss after playing the toughest strength of schedule in the entire country, they are essentially being punished for getting to their conference championship game. If that happens, then the message the committee has sent is do not go to your conference championship game and lose. And if we're going to take Georgia out of it, and look, Indiana fans, Big Ten fans are going to lose their minds if a 3-loss Georgia team gets in over a 1-loss Indiana team. We're going to say, well, losses don't even matter. At some point, you just cannot punish a team for having to play an extra game that nobody else had to play. That's the weirdest part of this college. Like, I think you can use conference championships as a nice little extra bonus. Obviously, you win it, you're probably going to get a bye, but you can't sit here and fault Georgia for playing a game that other teams didn't have to play on their schedule. I think they have to get in if they lose the SEC championship game.
I completely agree. I think they will. I truly don't think the SEC or the Big Ten are going to be ones that ever have to worry about that problem. It's why I brought up the ACC, because I think for the ACC and the Big 12, you sit on much less stable ground. Let's put it this way. This would never be a question of strategy. Like, we wouldn't be talking about coaches having the wherewithal with 18 to 23-year-olds to, like, sit guys for a game so they would lose strategically to just be good enough. Like, you can't pull that off in this sport. It's too chaotic and uneven. What would happen if that happened is they would break the wheel, Game of Thrones style. Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti would basically say, hey, we're going to rework this whole system now. Those 4 automatic bids that we wanted for our conference, we're getting them now, or else we'll take our ball and go somewhere else. I think that would happen pretty quickly if that happened to the SEC or the Big Ten. I don't know if that same thing's going to be true for if it happens to the ACC. The Big 12, you wave bye-bye to that. They're getting one team in. That's a one-bid league, and we know it's going to be a bid thief more than likely at this point. But for the ACC, with 2 teams likely inside the top 12, I think they're the far more fascinating case study in this. And with you, Fitz, I tend to agree. Based on how this is structured, I understand it not meaning as much when it was 4 teams in the playoff, and winning your conference championship was just another data point. We legislated this all differently. I think in the 12-team playoff, you've got to be rewarded for being good enough, especially in a world without divisions, where it's just, hey, we're taking the 2 best teams in each conference, and you're going to the dance. That's got to mean something in that final committee ranking room, and I think for the ACC, that's true when we stack their resume up with a team like Indiana. I do think now all of a sudden, Indiana is a lot more of a bubble team than they were going into this weekend.
Yeah, well, 100%. And by the way, a week ago when we were hanging out, it was BYU and Colorado. Could somehow 2 teams get in from the Big 12? And now we're sitting there saying absolutely. And a year ago, we all thought that this expansion would make Tuesdays in the committee virtually worthless. Instead, games have more value. Tuesdays have more value. Committee has more value. Like, this is wild. This has been a massive home run for college football, by the way.
It certainly has. And for the people that produce the Tuesday night shows, man, oh man, the job has never been easier. So have at it and go off with that one. So again, we'll get a look at that coming up tonight here. Coming up next, we'll give you a look at our predictions on that, whip around a little bit more of the NFL with our buddy Jason Fitz here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jason Fitz here with you guys. So guys, the CFP rankings drop tonight. We've already talked about this a little bit here, but give us your predictions for what this is going to look like after it drops this evening. Tell us where we're going.
Yeah, I actually think, Jesse, this one's pretty easy to read right now as we kind of did a little draw up of what ours look like. The top end's largely going to stay the same. Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3. And I know there's some people that are buzzing about maybe would Notre Dame jump Penn State at the 4 and 5 spot. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Penn State still is going to get the respect of having played Ohio State close. Everything else largely the same. And Notre Dame still lost to NIU. And I think at some level of this conversation, having that held against them is still an important part of this process. Notre Dame will be right behind that at the 5 seed. They'll control their own destiny, not only in making the playoff, but in hosting a home game by going out against USC and getting a win they're expected to. And then I would go Miami, Georgia moving up to number 7 with an SEC championship game spot clinched now. They will play for the conference title as we talked about. Tennessee sitting in that honey hole. Tennessee quietly has found their way into maybe the best spot in the sport at the 7 seed, where you're not on the bubble. You're not going to play in the conference championship. I don't actually think they're that great of a team, but they have worked their way in a gauntlet of a schedule with enough good wins to get to that spot. And then I think SMU at 9, followed by IU at 10, Boise State at 11, and then Alabama at 12 would be where I'd have them right now, with Ole Miss, Clemson, South Carolina, and ASU just on the outside looking in. And Jason, that'll be interesting too with South Carolina, who's a 3-loss team right now, who's really a couple of possessions away from being a 1-loss team, and who has Clemson at the end of the year, who's going to be well regarded by the committee in a game that's infinitely winnable for South Carolina to just, if nothing else, be a very interesting resume boost and conversation piece in the committee room for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, and I had South Carolina actually at 13, first out this week. And for that exact reason, it's going to be interesting. South Carolina fans are going to be yelling. If we're talking about Bama in this, we should certainly be talking about South Carolina. Like the Bama loss to Oklahoma, a blowout loss to an unranked team, is fairly inexcusable. So I'm with you. There's a little bit of traction for South Carolina. I just think, man, the concept, and this is where I don't believe in brand biases. I believe the committee does a very good job of putting all that aside. It just feels easier, as dumb as that sounds. It feels easier to say, well, Alabama with 3 losses versus South Carolina with 3 losses. Like, it's just this, I'll admit out of the gates that's brand bias in my mind. The only thing I think out of your rankings, by the way, I think Boise State's going to be a little higher than you do. I don't think Boise State played well. I think Boise State deserved to lose that game, but they haven't valued SMU through the process of this entire thing. I think I have Boise State ahead of SMU and Indiana. So Boise State all the way up to 9 this week, even though they struggled with Wyoming.
I think 2 things. Tennessee is in the sweet spot. We talked about this last week. They won't play in a title game. They're sitting at 8. They're in. Just take care of your business in your regular season, and you're going to be in. And I think the committee has their way with Indiana, because I actually think Indiana is going to be 11th or 12th. And then it's going to be like, committee's going to be like, nothing we could do. We had to put these teams up there that are winning. They're going to fall out. They're going to kind of gain not the respect, I shouldn't say that, but they won't have to put Indiana out. Indiana will get knocked out of the top 12 because of the way the formula works. So I think that's the way they kind of save themselves with Indiana.
That's so smart, by the way, that they're like, hey, we ranked them top 12. I can't help the fact that the seeding doesn't work that way. Like, we didn't do the seeding. We're just a committee. We still think they're top 12. Oh, God. Fans will lose their minds.
Yeah, no, it all got messier this weekend, especially when Ole Miss and Alabama decided to do what they did. Indiana was one we could have predicted, at least in some form and fashion. This option was on the table. Alabama getting annihilated by Oklahoma's defense. I mean, that was Brent Venables, say what you want about what's happened with the offense this year. A masterclass defensively of taking away Jalen Milroe's legs as the chief weapon for this team. And then Ole Miss, I mean, we knew, everyone feels like something like this is always sort of coming with Ole Miss. Florida's also just one of those teams, man, now that DJ Lagway is healthy and on that roster, start tanking for the 2027 first overall pick in the NFL draft, because sweet Jesus, that dude is terrifying. So we will wait and see how all of that plays out. Again, I think college football generally does a good job taking care of itself, and we've got a rivalry weekend to finish off the sport coming up this weekend for the regular season that should be one for the ages. Fitzy, while we've got you here, because In addition to hosting the College Football Power Hour, you also do a great job covering the NFL over at Yahoo Sports. And we were talking a little bit earlier about this. Do you think it is at all unfair, and I guess fair is, a made-up word in a place where we judge pigs, but do you think that there's an issue with propping up Saquon Barkley's MVP candidacy coming off this weekend and not at least giving some credence to the same sort of billing for Derrick Henry, given how interesting and how close both seasons have been productive-wise?
It's funny because somebody asked me yesterday who the MVP should be, and I said if I had a vote, I'd do in either order Saquon and Henry. Like, that's 1 and 2. Like it feels like those are the two guys that are absolutely like they've changed so much of the way teams have to account for the offenses that they're on. And to me, yes, when you see 255 yards and you see, my God, when you see a play that EA Sports has to go in and figure out how to create in the video game, like it's hard to shut those things out of your mind. I think the toughest part of all this, and I've said this to you guys before, is remember, like, I don't remember the last time a team paid a running back and it ended up killing them. I'm watching through this year, Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, and now Saquon, obviously through the course of this, absolutely demolished teams while they're out there getting it done for teams that are glad they have them. So I think we need to change our running back conversation. But Saquon is remember too, for the Eagles, they'd have one less loss if Saquon simply held on to the ball that was right there in his hands. Like, this Eagles team is on fire, and it is running through Saquon. It's running through Saquon when they have so many other weapons that they could utilize. It is Saquon's offense. It is Saquon's team. Like, the Giants are so bad, they made us forget how good Saquon is. Like this, and I'll say this too. Saquon's younger than Christian McCaffrey. So for all of we fell in love with Christian when he went from Carolina to the 49ers, and we saw what he changed. Saquon's going to do the same for the Eagles for the next 3 or 4 years. I think we've got like Christian McCaffrey part 2 here.
I would agree with you there, Jason. I also think the running back conversation is due to change. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Saquon Barkley is making the same right now as Gabe Davis is making, and that's not okay in terms of what they do for these teams. At the same time, this idea or this notion that the Giants or the Raiders or the Tennessee Titans should have paid to retain the services of these guys, I also think is misguided, because not every team is built to go. These guys would not be having these kind of seasons if they were with their old teams right now, because the situation matters. 2 of these guys, especially the top 2, went to situations where the Eagles have the best O-line or one of the best O-lines in football. Both of them have mobile quarterbacks. There's healthy offenses around the 2 of them. And I think what's going to happen is some people might think, oh, we can go back and we're going to pay running backs again, even for bad teams, and expect them to take us from bad to good. I think paying high-end running backs is more about going from good to great if you're a roster than it is expecting one of those guys to take you from bad to good. I don't think that should be the takeaway from this season, and I'm not saying it is. I want these guys to get their due, but I think we need to have a conversation about the context where Saquon Barkley is going to a situation where we watched the war machine in front of him blocking the other night. He didn't have that in New York ever, and that's a huge part of the change.
But there's something I learned from you guys when we first started working together. And Senior, you really harped on this so much. Situation matters, coaching matters, organizational structure matters, like systems matter. And I agree with all of that. It really changed my thinking of the way I look at player success or failure. The one thing I would say, Mike, is you're right, but we have to ask a real question here of why teams that suck don't find a way to take the great pieces they have and build around them. We see teams try and build around quarterbacks all the time. My thing is, if you're the Giants, you're the Raiders, if you're any of these teams that had a superstar running back in the building and you never treated it like chopped, I'm going to open the basket of ingredients. Here's what I have. I'm going to make you the best food you've ever had. That's what I want great organizations to do. I want great coaches to do. So shame on the Giants for never putting the pieces around Saquon to get this version. It's not just that they couldn't have, it's that they didn't. And that's what drives me crazy.
I think they tried and just kind of missed on something, because the Giants invested high draft capital in their offensive line. They just, outside of Andrew Thomas, didn't really have those guys hitting. Now, John Michael Schmitz has dealt with some injury in the middle of that offensive line. Evan Neal was a full-blown miss out of Alabama at right tackle. And so part of that is, hey, you've got to draft well at those spots. Like a team like the Carolina Panthers is a fascinating look at this right now with what's going on around Bryce Young, because they went and spent big on offensive line this offseason, and they're getting that payment. It's why they were able to go and feel good about paying Chuba Hubbard, because that offensive line is doing doing a better job protecting Bryce Young, but they have done a really good job. We said they're top 10 in yards before contact per rush in the NFL right now. That's a market improvement in an area that they invested in that now could pay dividends for them in other spots. So, Dad, I feel, selfishly, the moral of the story is you need to invest, and draft well at the offensive line. And first and foremost, building your house with that foundation is critical, but it all works hand in hand with these contracts.
Yeah, it does. And Jason, you can look at your Raiders getting rid of Josh Jacobs, who a couple years ago led the league in rushing and then obviously fell off a little bit last year before they let him go. And now he's the third leading rusher in the league with the Packers. They're building around, obviously, Max Crosby on defense. So let me ask you this. Let me mix college and pro. You have 3 2-win teams, Jacksonville, the Raiders, and the Giants. Jacksonville obviously doesn't need a quarterback. So if the Raiders were to have first dibs at a quarterback, who is Jason Fitz taking from the college ranks to be the Raiders quarterback?
All right, so I'll answer this twofold. I think the Raiders are selecting Shedeur Sanders. Mark Davis, from people I've talked to, Mark Davis is absolutely, that's real. He loves Shedeur Sanders. It's going to be Shedeur if they have that chance. I like Cam Ward a lot. I don't love either of these quarterbacks compared to last year, but if I'm making a decision in this year's draft, there's an element of Cam Ward on schedule that just I'm really comfortable with. And by that, I mean his ability to drop back 1-2, get rid of the ball. I really like that we see that. And there's a part of Shedeur that's more of an improvisational quarterback at times. He's definitely got that Caleb Williams. I can run around and I can make magic happen. Cam doesn't do that as much or as naturally. I love that we want that. I'm just really comfortable with tight window throws for Cam Ward. And that's something that we just haven't seen as much of from Shedeur. So I think it's 1A, 1B. I would lean Cam Ward. I think the Raiders will end up with Shedeur Sanders. And I will again echo, I've talked to so many people. I have yet to find a single person that has told me that either of these quarterbacks would have been selected as a top 5 quarterback in last year's draft. Like the line is JJ McCarthy. All 5 of them would have gone before either of these quarterbacks in last year's draft.
Yeah, we talked to Matt Miller from ESPN a couple of days ago, who I think said it would have probably been around Bo Nix where these guys would have slotted ahead of, or around J.J. McCarthy in that last draft class here. I do think part of the conversation that we're having right now also makes it really interesting, and it's slightly different because drafting running backs high out of college when they are talented means you get them for comparatively cheaper for longer during the prime of their age in terms of production. But this makes the Ashton Genty conversation really interesting. I know so many people are looking at the Cowboys and saying, well, they saw what they didn't do last offseason. They're going to go and rectify that. We don't know what the future for Zach Martin's going to look like. You have invested in that group. Tyler Smith seems like he's going to be the next big star for you. You're going to wait and see what happens with Tyler Guyton, who's had a rough rookie season. But is this Dallas Cowboys team going to be capable up front? Or is it going to be, hey, Ashton Genty, you're going to be expected to go and make that group better some? I think he is going to be a really interesting eval come this spring because there's no doubt he's a top 10 talent. But again, you've got to be a roster that's capable of absorbing that if you're going to go and max this out.
Yeah, and with that being said, Mike, because you used Carolina as an example earlier on their ability to run the football. Also, the biggest knock I heard on Bryce Young coming out of college was that at times he struggled pre-snap to identify and communicate blitz pickup. It was just something that he really needed to work on. What you see in his rookie year, he struggled with that. What did Carolina do? Carolina got a bunch of experienced offensive linemen in front of him that could take some of that off of his plate pre-snap recognition, right? And what have we seen? It took a little bit of time, but as the season is going on, Bryce is playing better now. I believe that part of that is having experienced, qualified offensive linemen in front of him. Like, I'll die on this hill over and over again. The best thing that could possibly happen in an NFL draft is your team selecting some big fat guy you've never heard of that turns out to be the next big fat guy that's there for the next 12, 15 years. Like that. That's life. You need a big fat guy for 12 years.
Yeah, if you hear a guy with a slightly Polish-sounding last name who's from somewhere in the Midwest or rural Georgia, congratulations. You're probably going to be pretty happy for the next decade of your life watching him block for your quarterback and running back here. Fitzy, always a pleasure, man. Appreciate the time. Have a very happy Thanksgiving down at Foxwoods, man. I'm excited to see the aftermath of this.
You mean down at the DraftKings Sportsbook at Foxwoods, which is where I'll be. So you guys want to use some power and pull and get me a tab there? I mean, let's go. They got a turkey sandwich special I'm excited for. Come on. Get it for me for free, boys. Let's go.
They've got a turkey sandwich special that I'm excited for. I hate you so much. Head on over to the DraftKings Sportsbook and hang out with Jason Fitz this Thanksgiving. I cannot think of a better use of your time. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We've talked a lot about messy situations today, which is honestly probably pretty appropriate as we're getting ready for Thanksgiving. Because while we talked to Fitzy about what he's got coming up for his Thanksgiving plans, again, I love a good alternative holiday plan. At GoJo and Golic, what are your favorite alternative holiday plans that you've had over the years? Maybe you couldn't get back home with family. Maybe your family's a little bit non-traditional in the way they do things. I always think it's interesting. But part of getting ready for the holidays is bracing for impact for those uncomfortable questions and conversations. As someone that's been perennially single, you usually get grilled by everybody for when you're going to go and get into the relationship, when you're going to have kids, all these different things that pop up. This year, Lord knows, the political debates that are probably going to go on at Thanksgiving tables across this country are the kind of things that might divide families for years to come. So, Dad, this holiday in particular, I feel like embraces the mess as well or better than any.
Well, I mean, here's what I do to nullify that with the group, with whatever group I'm with. I wear pants with a button, and when I'm done eating, I undo my belt and my top button of my pants and sit down to watch football, and nobody wants to talk to me or nobody wants to sit near me. So I'm pretty much
That's
left
also the
alone.
smells coming out of you. That's also the smells
that's
coming
true.
out of you. Then.
But that's still, though, that's playing chess, not checkers. That's putting myself in a position to maybe somebody sees that seat next to me and they go, huh, dude's got his button unbuttoned and his belt undone. Yeah, I don't think so. And I get left alone to watch football.
Well, and see, it's a good strategy to make yourself so undesirable to the people around you. But, Dad, you've also kind of been in the class for a while where you're not going to get too many uncomfortable questions at Thanksgiving. You've been happily married for so long here. You've been incredibly successful here. You've got all these things going here. Jesse, as you know, Thanksgiving, it can kind of be weird because you're also in a lot of cases for people seeing relatives you don't see very often. So now you got to make conversation with people you don't always necessarily like, get along with, or at the very least have that much in common with anymore, who want to know these intimate details about you.
So here's what I'm missing, because my husband and I switch off holidays. So this year is his year for Thanksgiving and it's my year for Christmas. So we're with his family for Thanksgiving. My family is out in LA because my brother and sister live in LA. And here's what I'm missing. My brother's girlfriend's family and my family are meeting for the first time and spending Thanksgiving together at a house in Malibu. So everybody's together at a house and meeting for the first time. And when I tell you, I'm so mad that I'm missing this because it's going to be so entertaining. Because my brother and his girlfriend have been together. She was at my wedding. They've been together for a long time. So I can only pray to our sweet Lord Jesus Christ that somebody asks when they're getting married. I can only pray somebody asks that, and there's some video, you know.
I mean, that's where your brother's girlfriend's family is going to come into play. On like, dude, when you putting a ring on it? I mean, seriously, how long? Yeah, you would be a fly on the wall.
I would be stirring the pot.
Jesse, you have the added thing of if you're in a group setting, you have kids to take care of too, though, which really kind of adds to the workload. Oh,
totally. I mean, but in a way, it's kind of nice because then, you know, family will step in and help you with the kids and everything. So that's something that's nice. But to add another layer to what's going on with my family, my brother's girlfriend, who, by the way, is incredible, and like we are obsessed with her, but her younger sister got married this year.
So I mean, so Buddy kind of needs to speed up the process a little bit here. Like, we're sort of saying it for the family in attendance there. Although, Jesse, to your point, if we were to handicap this right now, and I just got off the phone with the people from the DraftKings Sportsbook, somebody asking your brother or future sister-in-law at this point, when is this going to happen? When are you guys going to get married? I think the odds are really at like minus 750 right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's creeping more towards quadruple digits. We might have to take it off the board soon because that is such a home run, easy Thanksgiving question that needs to get brought. And quite honestly, based on what you described, probably needs to be asked here. Like, we need a little nudge here, brother. What's going on?
Oh, 100% needs to be asked. The man is 36 years old. He needs to come on.
Well, either your brother's girlfriend, it's one of two things. She really loves your brother and is willing to wait, or she just does not want to go back into the dating pool.
Yeah, I think it's a combo of that and out in LA. I mean, Gojo, maybe you can speak to this. I don't know. Kind of seems like nobody's in a rush out there. It's like you guys are just kind of like, oh, we're all Peter Pan in LA and it doesn't really matter. And, ooh, we're having fun. It's like, why are you in the club? You are 36 years old. Please.
Jesse,
Please.
I kid you not. The area I live, so Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach, generally referred to as the South Bay area. And it was told to me coming out here, oh yeah, people call that Never Neverland because you don't have to grow up if you don't want to down here. Now, plenty of people do. There are plenty of, families with beach kids, and the rich ones usually all drive golf carts around here. It's very easy to kind of see the way it stratifies. But no, to your point, I always said this because I went to school in the Midwest, as Dad did. Going to school there and seeing my friends that coupled up, the hit rate is almost perfect, where when you had a Midwest on Midwest couple that met at Notre Dame, married by 24, kids by 25 or 26, they're on kid 4 or 5 now. Most of them are like 8 years old. And the ones that had at least one person in the relationship that was from a coast, East Coast or West Coast, usually married closer to 30, usually kids well after that, taking a little bit more of their time. So not a wholly unfamiliar phenomenon, Jesse. You are absolutely right. So that is juicy. That's going to be a great time there at the Thanksgiving table. I won't make the easy joke transition here as we talk about Aaron Rodgers and Thanksgiving, but for the Jets, it's going to be a messy holiday altogether. There's no doubt, Dad. And with Aaron Rodgers, there's been these reports now of Aaron Rodgers potentially playing with an injury and refusing to go get it checked out, which honestly feels like a callback. I feel like people in your era would have been doing that, where it's, I know something's wrong. I know I don't want to come off the field. And so, no, you're not putting me in the MRI machine.
Oh, no, that's exactly right. I would refuse all treatment there is. I wouldn't even go into the training room. I mean, back in the day, coaches noticed who was in the training room and who was on the list of getting ice or getting any kind of treatment. So you just kind of got an ice bag on your own and iced on your own. You didn't go in. And Aaron is still of that age, where he's been in a long time. But listen, with Aaron, it's not a matter of the Jets are going to go in a different direction with quarterback next year. It's now the drama has gotten to the point of, is it going to happen this year? Is Aaron going to be put on IR, or is Aaron going to be benched, or is Aaron going to be released? It's like, will Aaron Rodgers finish the season as the quarterback of the Jets? He's definitely not going to be the quarterback of the Jets next year.
No, and I think that's probably why Aaron's holding on right now, because we saw, per friend of the program, Diana Rossini's report the other day, that the relationship between Aaron Rodgers and Woody Johnson seems strained. According to Diana, she said Johnson has lost confidence in Rodgers' ability to lead their team to the first playoff berth in 14 years, a drought that still stands as the longest in major North American professional sports. And this is one of those things we all understand and can see. Aaron Rodgers is not the guy he used to be, and Woody Johnson is the guy that, by reports that came out after the Joe Douglas firing, wanted to bench Aaron Rodgers like 4 weeks into this season. So it all seems to a point where, Dad, this obviously is going to come to an end, I'd imagine, before the end of the season as well, considering how banged up Aaron Rodgers seems to be. He's been hit a ton this year, and he is. It's just the sands of time finally came. The injury last year was the straw that broke the camel's back for one of the greatest players that I've ever seen in the position, but unfortunately, who, like everyone else, gets old at a certain point and can't be asked to shoulder the same load and was not capable of it this season.
And listen, there's going to be a purging of that team, right? Because they brought in veterans to work around Aaron Rodgers, O-line veterans who probably won't be there. Mike Williams, they traded away already. They got rid of him. So that team is definitely, they tried it for a couple of years. It failed miserably. And now they're going to purge themselves from the aging veterans and start to build again.
Yeah, it is going to be a lot of wholesale changes, because you're right. They understandably pushed all their chips into the middle of the table. When you brought over Aaron Rodgers to be the centerpiece of this team, which at the time we understood there was a possibility you could still get a guy closer to MVP ball than not there. And if you're going to do that, your timeline shrinks to almost nothing. And they gave him the guys to make him comfortable, and it just didn't work out. We've seen bad bets at this quarterback spot here recently. Still, nothing can touch what's gone on in Cleveland. But New York is certainly a close second, and they're going to have a chance to wipe the slate almost completely clean next year. The problem that everyone brings up, and the reason Stu Gatz never gets excited about anything, is because the same family and the Johnsons are still going to ultimately be the ones making these decisions. We'll finish off the show with this, that, the third next on GoJo and Golic. All right, let's finish up the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, which includes our YouTube channel, which is right now 2 subscribers away from 1,000. I love arbitrary round numbers to get excited about, so go out and smash that. There's the great promotion DraftKings is running right now, where if you're following DraftKings on Instagram and the DraftKings Network on Instagram, and you go and subscribe to our GoJo and Golic YouTube channel, leave a comment Golic in any of the videos, you can up your chances for a $500 bonus on DraftKings Sportsbook in DK Cash. So go check that out. I butchered that read promptly, but it's a cool offer. Go check it out on Instagram. If you miss any of our interviews, thank you to Justin Pugh, former NFL offensive lineman, for stopping by, and our buddy Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. You can check those out wherever you get the pod or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. Let's talk about Danny Hurley, who was out enjoying one of the greatest splendors in sports, the Maui Invitational in college basketball, a tradition unlike any other. For Notre Dame fans, Mike Bray, our former head coach on the basketball team on the men's side, used to be the poster child for the Maui Invitational every year. And Danny Hurley and UConn had a tough one. UConn gets upset by Memphis in the first round of the Maui Invitational off a overtime suspect over-the-back call that Dan Hurley took to the podium to voice his displeasure about after. Take a listen to this.
I don't know what happened. I might have lost my balance by the absurdity of the call, or maybe I tripped. But if I made that call at that point, I would have ignored the fact that I was on my back. If I made that call, I would have ignored that. I would have ignored that. That was a major, obviously a major. How you could call that while that game was going on, the way that game was going on, is just beyond me.
He went on to say that he didn't even know one of the officials was a college ref and that he knew the other two, and he wasn't surprised here. Dad, this is as sassy as I've seen a men's college basketball coach at the microphone in a while. Now, this was in overtime of what ultimately ended up being a loss. They ended up getting multiple free throws because Danny Hurley was assessed a technical for his reaction to the call, which was a suspect call on the over-the-back. I think he was absolutely right in his assessment of the play, but the bottom line is he didn't like the result because I think now this means he probably has to leave Hawaii sooner.
Yeah, you heard the soundbite there of when he fell down. He actually fell down, and with his displeasure, as you said, he got teed up. Here was his explanation of the foul. He said, "That was a joke. I just watched it." He said there was a player on Memphis that made a half-ass effort to rebound a basketball, and Liam McNeely, his player that got called for the foul, high-pointed that rebound. For that call to be made at that point of the game was a complete joke. So the call was made. Hurley fell down, to which he responded, "I may have lost my balance or tripped." But he said the guy who made the call shouldn't have even worried about me falling down because he made that call. Lost his mind, got a tee. So the guy had 4 free throws, 2 for the technical, 2 for the foul, took a 4-point lead. Memphis ended up winning by 2. But you're right. That may be the thing that Dan Hurley's most bummed about is because I'm sure they planned on staying the whole time. And maybe they still will. Who knows? But if they have to leave early because of that, that would make me mad as well.
Hey, college basketball season's a long run. I admire his passion at this early junction of the season to try and get men's college basketball in the news a little bit. So no harm, no foul there, even though it was a foul and there was harm for that UConn team. Jesse, let's get to that and an interesting plot twist out here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, kids, don't try this at home. So there was an insurance fraud situation that happened in the Los Angeles area where some people said that a bear caused damage to their vehicle to the tune of 6 figures. And after further investigation, the companies found out it was a person in a bear costume. So the person in a bear costume went into a car. There was footage of it. They sent this to the insurance companies to try to make a claim. And basically, they had all these detectives look into it because the story was fishy. These people dressed up in a bear costume to do this damage. And the thing that stood out to me was it said that there was 6 figures worth of damage. And I was like, what kind, was this a spaceship? What kind of a car were they doing damage in? Turns out it was a Rolls-Royce Ghost. So that would explain the 6 figures worth of damage.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a little bit of sense here. the Stugotz is strong in everybody, and everybody's got a little bit of Stugotz in them. Everyone should go to StugottsBook.com, by the way. Stugotz's personal record book that has chapters written, I believe, by both you and me, Dad. So this seems like a story uniquely gifted and uniquely suited for Stugotz.
Yeah, it definitely does. Operation Bear Claw. I mean, $141,000 from the insurance company, 3 different insurance companies. I mean, you have to get better actors, right? I mean, if you're going to put on a bear suit and act the part, you got to act the part better.
Well, Senior, they really screwed it up, actually, because you'd think if you were going to do this, you would have really done your research. But I guess the color of the bear costume was all wrong for the bears in the region.
Yeah.
So they saw the video and they were like, what? So, red flag.
Like Dan Hurley said of the Memphis player going up for the rebound, they half-assed it.
Yeah.
They half-assed it, and they got caught.
Yep.
Which is surprising because we're in Hollywood. If you figured any place would be able to hair and makeup your way into a more realistic bear costume with some sort of like respect for the realities of the bears in this region, it would be a place that does this sort of thing at least more frequently than others. So a little bit surprised that Hollywood dropped the ball there, but it's just a reminder, if you're going to have Operation Bear Claw, it should only be referring to a donut run that you make on a Saturday morning before the college football slate. Jesse, let's finish things off with the third here and a very interesting weasel situation. Me and rodents seem to always find their way into this segment.
Yeah, so at a Japanese school at a kindergarten, all these little kids' shoes kept going missing. So the police are like, we got to figure out what's going on. So they set up a security camera and found out that the culprit was a little weasel, literally a weasel, a rodent, going in and sneaking and grabbing the shoes. At one point, 15 shoes went missing in one go. So they were like, I mean, something's going on. Yeah, it's just a little weasel. So I don't know, kind of cute. I feel like give him some shoes you don't care about. Let him keep taking fake shoes. I don't know. I like weasels.
I think it was cool. I mean, it's just like a kindergarten. They had little boxes where you could, all the kids could put their shoes separately and such. And yeah, they put a video on it, and it is a cute little weasel. Would pick a box, go into it and take a shoe and then go take another shoe. And I don't know where he carried it off to, and looking at the video, he just carried it off and then came back. I'm saying it could be a she, I don't know.
It was a girl.
I'm with you, Jesse. It's a very cute weasel.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's a very cool little thing.
So experts are saying that the weasel likely gave birth recently and was using the shoes to line its nest. So cute.
That's unbelievably cute.
Yeah.
Man, I'm not gonna lie. Weasel's one of those animals that I think because they got a bad rap because for so long, I guess behavior like this is why people started using weasel as like a derogatory term when they talked about someone. Like generally, if you're describing someone as a weasel, it means they've done something sort of like underhanded to you. And again, when I look at them, they look pretty cute. This seems like relatively harmless behavior. It was sort of like I did a lot of learning and a lot of soul searching when I found that possum under the sink in my bathroom. And I feel like this same sort of juncture with this weasel is a good opportunity for us to go maybe inform ourselves and learn a little bit more and stop using this word as something that's a slight and maybe give it a more positive spin, as this weasel mom is just out here working 2 jobs to try and provide for her family.
Yeah, and I read further down in the article, they said that the only action they took was they put a little bit of netting over the cubbies so that the shoes stay safe. So the weasel is safe. We're not doing anything to the weasel. Thank God.
The weasel just has to find...
Yeah, that is true, considering what we've seen happen to squirrels lately.
God.
Yeah, boy, that's the truth. The weasel is fine. The weasel is living. The weasel just has to find something else to build her nest, because I'm sure as she went back and thought, oh, wow, netting. Kelly can't get through that. Unless she chews through the netting. Who knows? Maybe she has a wherewithal to do that, to keep providing.
But then she'd be weaseling her way back into the classroom, and then she'd be feeding into the stereotype about weasels, and then we have this endless cycle that leads us back to this point here. So we're going to find out if weasels are a cause worth championing and get back to you with more information on that. I'm sure now I've just tempted fate enough for one to show up in my apartment here. Hopefully you don't think we weaseled you out of anything. If you agree, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review the show, leave it a 5-star rating, smash subscribe on the YouTube channel. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.